welcome to the first seminar in our annual seminar series. I'd like to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Cosmin Munteanu. Cosmin is the co-director of the Technologies for Aging Gracefully Lab at the University of Toronto. He's also an assistant professor at the Institute of Communication, Culture, Information and Technology, also at the University of Toronto. His wide-ranging research interests lie in human-computer interactions, automated speech recognition, user interfaces with technologies, mobile computing and computing technologies, and the ethics of assistive technologies, and that's the critical part that we're particularly interested in. He's a, if you like, a technologically informed critical researcher, a humanistically informed scientist. And he's here today to talk to us about bridging generations and reducing social marginalization through user interfaces. How they can empower, how they can assist, how they can network older people in Canada and beyond. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the introductions. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks so much for having me here. It's a great place, as I've already seen in this few hours I've been around. So hopefully you'll find this kind of reaching our sort of geographical distance as well, as kind of doing this also as a way to see how we can further collaborate, and we're just so closely located. It's kind of a shame that it took us so long to finally get together. And also thanks for the nice introductions. I'm going to start with a confession. I'm an electrical engineer by training, and I am a social scientist by trade, and I've done everything possible in between. So I'm not going to spend any time with other introductions. I'm going to start a little bit with a technical view of where we are in that end of the engineering side of the spectrum. And we have an obsession that's been going around for a long, long time. And that is, we don't like our hands much. You would see me using them a lot, so please watch out for the clicker, because sometimes I lose it. But this is sort of the holy grail of what we call human-computer interaction. We want to interact without hands. We want to interact without explicit interfaces. And we've been dreaming about this for a long time. For those of you who saw this movie, we were promised this is going to be 2001, where we're going to interact with everything that's technology without using anything around us, just speaking to machines the way we speak to other people. I know we've been promising this for a long time. We almost made it. This was 1979. I'm not going to show the video, it's quite long. This is an MIT project, and it's called Put That There. And it was the first time they successfully used voice and gestures to manipulate digital interfaces. The operator is looking at a map and pointing at things and says, move that there. And this computer moves it, and it was a major success. So everything was promising we're going to get there, and everything would be solved in terms of all our problems with technology. We're not quite there yet. We've been dreaming about robots and assistive technologies for a long, long, long time. We're still obsessing this, and one reason we're not there yet is we're obsessing with what we think it's sort of this kind of space-age technology of having everything handy, having everything good, working for us transparently. We don't have to put any effort, so we're pushing technology development along that line of doing things in ways we dreamed about without thinking that that may not be the way it makes sense in terms of how we're using them. And one of my favorite recent examples is Amazon Alexa, which is the newest thing that everyone wants to have. And as you probably heard, it's not working the way it should be working. So I'm going to show you 20 seconds of an interesting interaction with Amazon Alexa. That
play ticker. Alexa, play ticker.
Bobby, can you talk to play wheels?
You want to hear a station for porn detected. Porno range on hot chick, amateur girl,
No.
Alexa, stop!
not what we intended. We're pushing these technologies without thinking about the context of use and about our users. I used to teach spoken language interaction, and I thought, I'm going to run out of material, and then Alexa came along. I have material for another few years of lecturing. So we're not there, but what's at stake? We're still concerned with how we use this technology and actually making them work for us. One of the things that's at stake is that we are now dealing with everything in digital format. Everything is shifting that way, regardless of whether we want it or not. It's getting harder and harder to interact with it. One of my favorite examples is YouTube. There are 72 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute. 72 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute. It's humanly impossible to see everything, especially if you want to do this on a mobile phone. There are many other challenges that would still justify the need to have these interfaces that are easy to use, natural, it doesn't take any effort to learn how to use them, and especially as we're concerning with more marginalized users who may have difficulty using traditional interfaces. So why should we still bother with this natural and intelligent interfaces? Well, they are a very natural form of communication for us. We still interact human to human by speech, by gestures, as you see me doing right now. And these natural interfaces can be very useful for us. However, what I'm going to claim in this presentation is that also, despite their naturalness, despite the advances that we've seen, they risk further marginalizing some of the users if we're not designing them properly. Touch is probably one of the few very recent exceptions. iPads, tablets like that seem to be usable across a full range of conditions, but even those are some question mark. So you may ask me, as an engineer, isn't this a hard problem to have all this? And despite what everyone's throwing money at, AI is still very far down the road from actually helping us the way we would like to have it. And it is true. Natural interfaces are very hard to process, not just because of the Amazon Alexa example. It's actually quite hard. So 2 years ago, those who watched game shows on TV, Jeopardy, they had Watson on Jeopardy. Watson is IBM's most powerful and most intelligent computer. They have Watson compete. Watson won, commandingly. The problem with Watson is, despite IBM being one of the best research groups in the world in terms of artificial intelligence, speech, natural interfaces, they didn't have voice for Watson as an input. They didn't trust Watson to actually be able to handle human conversation. You can say, well, Alex Trebek is Canadian. He's Canadian with the accents. It's hard to get. But still, someone had to manually feed things into Watson to actually be able to work. So we're still far away from being able to support what we want to have through this artificial intelligence, through all these intelligent technologies that we have in many ways available. And how bad it is? It's actually quite bad. Error rates, and this is a bit of a strange graph, but error rates are typically around 20% for most of the tasks that involve things like speech, for example. So every other word that we try to say, it gets misrecognized. Deep neural networks is the newest fashion in artificial intelligence. Everyone's jumping on board. UOT is one of the places where we started. This helped lower the rates to a certain extent, but we still have a huge problem. Artificial intelligence, I pick speech recognition, so the way we interact with machines by voice, because that's sort of the front end of artificial intelligence. Performance of this system degrade catastrophically, even when we have the smallest deviation from what we expect as designers of these systems. Meaning, children using it, someone with an accent, someone that has certain vocal tract condition, someone has some disability, including older adults. Because as we age, our vocal tract is changing, and our systems are not designed for anyone that is above a certain age. So this is, I still have problems. I'm hoping that everyone understands what I'm saying, but I have an accent, and I call my bank, and half the time they don't get my birthday when I have to say it. Even something as simple as that. So we're still far away, but we're pushing these things stronger and stronger every day. These are all things you can buy at Best Buy today. You may not know what these things are, and I have some doubts that I know what these things are. Some of these involve smart homes. They're all about AI, controlling everything through voice, controlling the lights and the color of your lights with voice. And these are pushed on and on constantly. Some of them look funky. And I'm looking at these things and I'm wondering, who would buy these things? And are we helping people who would really need help from actually interacting with their home or with their environment or with things around themselves because they are either restricting their mobility or have other conditions? So we're pushing all this and we're not thinking about actually things that are needed. And I'm not talking when I say things that are needed strictly about conditions, medical conditions or other conditions. Something even as simple as grandma alone at home, spending time looking at her pictures. Who's going to help her with that? Do we have technology to help with something that a lot of other people are taking for granted? Going on Facebook, sharing some pictures, going on Instagram, showing some pictures. We still don't have AI technologies to help with this simple task. The good news, and this is something we've done a long time ago, we actually show that you don't need amazing technology to get what you need from AI systems. What you need is for this to be designed properly for the users that we want to be served by your technology. And that's sort of what I'm going to get to in this presentation. The idea is to make sure you get the design right and you push the technology a little bit at the back, bring the users to the front, and think about the users. And then you can achieve what I call truly multimodal interfaces. Interfaces that you can interact with in very natural ways, either voice, gestures, touching on them, full body interaction, that are natural, that are transparent to the users. And the idea with this is what you want to achieve, and this is where we're sometimes losing sight of it from an engineering perspective, is we don't want to be concerned with things like recognition errors from a purely technical perspective. What we should be concerned is what our users do, what do they need to do, and how can we make that process easier and as error-free as possible. And this is what we've been sort of getting at with all the technologies we've been building, where we move the AI part under the hood. And by doing that, what we can achieve is a human in the loop, where we think less about this is technology, these are people, but we co-design the process with users, create a human in the loop approach, and then that empowers users in terms of having ownership of how they interact with the digital world. And this is particularly useful for marginalized and underrepresented users. And I'm going to show you a few examples of things that we are doing that hopefully address some of these issues. So what I'm getting at is things such as natural modalities that are supported by artificial intelligence, speaking to machines, touching, gesturing, can help us transcend the confines of what are traditional digital interfaces. And this can allow us to benefit from everything that's new around us in terms of media and technology. But they can marginalize users unless we design them properly. We're not fully bringing this to drone technology, but we're on the way to do that. So we're going to see a few examples where I think they show how we can maybe think about technology as not the problem, but not also the solution. But just part of the natural evolution, we have to support us a little bit better. And as a side note, please interrupt me anytime. Don't want to have like sort of X minutes for talking and then just questions at the end. Anytime there's any questions, please interrupt me. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So what I'm going to try to go through are a few examples of multimodal assistive technologies for vowels that we think are examples of how we can bridge the generation gap, how we can reduce social isolation, and particularly digital marginalization. I don't need to say this. We're going to start with some positive news. We are living much longer. Canada is actually the third country in the world that has reached what they call the tipping point. And I don't like the language much because it suggests a problem. There are problems, but there is a tipping point where there are now more people over 65 than there are people under 16. That's sometimes for the economists to figure out. But that is the reality that we live longer. We have more time to enjoy, to convey wisdom, to benefit from all of this. This comes with some problems, and I don't like to look at aging as a medical problem. That's why I like to focus on other things that are a little bit harder to quantify. Isolation, loneliness, and mostly digital marginalization. I don't have to say it, probably it's numbers that many of you, as I understand, would know these things. Social isolation and loneliness are significant issues. About a third of older adults who are living in communities actually are socially isolated. Their social network is very, very small. Most of them feel lonely, which is a bit different than the social isolation, the feeling of loneliness. We had participants in our trials who live in multi-generational homes who declare themselves as lonely and socially isolated, despite having active caregiving duties for grandkids and so on. So it is a little bit more of an invisible problem. This is known, there's a lot of health and social downsides of this from a variety of perspectives. But one I want to focus on is something that's I'm starting to see very recently, and it's much harder to quantify. And what I call it a Catch22 situation. We are dealing with social isolation, with loneliness, and on top of everything, digital marginalization. These things kind of feed into each other. Older adults learn about digital technologies from their peers and from their families. Without these things, or with a reduced social support circle, they learn less about technology. Without access to technology, they have fewer means of enriching their social connection, because now we live apart, we spread countries in Canada, we're spread across many time zones, families move apart, it is much harder to stay in touch, and not just like simply exchanging a few pictures once in a while, but actually have meaningful connections with family and friends. And these things kind of feed into each other. So we risk, while in the past we were looking at things that are determined often by social and geographical barriers, now we have these digital barriers that come into this. So we have to be careful how we design these technologies to facilitate it. So the question is, can technology assist seniors with maintaining connections with family? And can technology itself overcome digital marginalization? So sort of fundamental question, can you fight fire with fire? And how to do that? And it's a bit ironic that we kind of realize, showing you examples of technologies. While I'm claiming that technology can further marginalize seniors. And I think the issue is how you design that technology and what it does. And one of the problems is often when we design technology, we end up with this. And not every piece of technology needs to be this complicated to be actually useful. Keeping it simple sometimes works much better. So what we do in TAGlab, for those of you who are not familiar, if you are in age well, you may have heard a bit of us. We're looking at designing technologies that make seniors and their caregivers capable, resourceful, independent, across conditions, enable greater inclusion, and where they need it most. So, mission is to reduce social isolation and digital marginalization through natural and social user interfaces. The way we do that is we're looking at research and development of technologies to enable safe access to knowledge, facilitate social sharing, support connectivity, and ultimately reduce digital marginalization across devices, across modalities, and across abilities. So being a bit agnostic in terms of pushing a certain technology or certain solution. So I'm going to show you a few projects that we're working on, and please interrupt me anytime with questions. Some of these projects are done, some of the projects are ongoing, some of these projects have started, and looking all at addressing this issue of digital marginalization. One of our oldest projects is what we call OUT. It's an accessible, large print listening and talking e-reader. And this started as a motivation from our own graduate students who like to read books to his grandma. His grandma was losing her eyesight, and they like to spend time together reading. And so we developed this iPad-based app that you can read to a loved one together, and then that person can repeat the event. The whole reading gets recorded, gets synchronized with the text, and they can read together. And they can read together without having the other person present, so they can repeat the experience of having a loved one's voice being read to them while they still have a little bit of eyesight, so they can still follow the text. So the idea is what we call reading together in the same place at different times. And the idea was to actually focus on the caregiver in terms of developing an artificial intelligence solution that captures the interaction, synchronizes the voice with the text, and then is able to play it back synchronized, so that the person following the text would hear the voice of the familiar loved ones. And there are audiobooks, so we're not trying to solve an accessible issue. There are audiobooks. You can even buy celebrity audiobooks. So the issue is not of access to books. The issue is having that loved person's voice being read. We had a lot of sort of AI behind the hood that helped us make this possible. Part of it we took out, and we realized reading together is not the only thing, and so there's a pleasurable activity, but there's other things such as access to information. All the times our seniors would say, well, it's great, we're reading together, we're having fun, we're reading the news sometimes, but sometimes I need to read some more serious things. So how do we access that? So we developed a platform that also works on tablets that help older adults receive very helpful information on top of having things read out to them by allowing family members to attach audio-video annotations. So you can record yourself leaving side notes to a piece of text. And these are very rich annotations that explain various documents. For this, we partnered with National Initiative for the Care of the Elderly. They provided us with a lot of materials. They have brochures on legal domain, financial domain, healthcare domain. I was reading some of those. There was a pamphlet that said how to take your medication, and I couldn't understand half the words in there. And they're written by pharmacists. They're written by subject experts. So you need help when you read those things. So having this connection with family members is very, very important. And there are a lot of technologies that do that. And we found seniors who are extremely tech savvy. Well, often are what I call very vertical savviness. They know one or two things very, very well, and then other things not so well. So especially seniors who are what we call the oldest old, so 85 plus, found that they tend to be more digitally marginalized than others. So one of the things we tried to address was having something that facilitates access to family members in ways that does not require knowing technology very well ahead of time. So we developed this as an app. It's called InTouch. Now it has spun off as a startup from our lab. The InTouch app was developed together with seniors. It was co-designed, and it was meant to be very, very simple. So it works on 10-inch tablets, and it has only 4 big buttons. That was the initial idea. So you can touch on the buttons. Now small buttons, you touch on the whole button. And it sends video messages, picture messages, voice messages, or you can just say hello to other people. So non-textual interface in terms of input. And the idea was to be designed for people who are not familiar with technology at all. And the idea was to be instantaneous but not real time, not require any typing, and help connect generations and avoid being left out. especially with grandchildren. We found that grandchildren are one of the source of motivation for seniors to learn new technologies. They wanted to stay in touch with their grandkids. I'll show you a video of the research prototype that has been developed with seniors.
Hi, Martin. Come get some car.
Hi, Susan. Father looks very good. By the way, how much snow have you had this week?
So this was designed together with caregivers and seniors, and one of the challenges we found was seniors wanted to get in the digital world of their family members. And this is what their family members wanted. But we had sort of a big gap. Seniors couldn't use existing technologies that family members, especially young ones, would use. And for family members, the challenge was adopting yet another app or another technology just for the sake of communicating with family members. So what we did, we built a system that works on top of email. So this is just an email interface in many ways. And email, you get an email on your phone, on your desktop, and if you have the app, you get it stripped down, modified, represent videos playback automatically, and it's all through email. So it doesn't require any new technology. And we find this extremely useful. We deploy this, so we started with a pilot. Now we have around more than 100 seniors using it in retirement homes around Toronto. It's very useful for a lot of them, and what we found out is that this is sort of a training wheels approach. They are now requiring more. So it acts as a transition for them to get more comfortable with technology. A lot of them never used a computer in their life. They want to now connect with friends. They want to connect with other people. They always ask me, okay, now what else can I do? It takes about 6 months for them to ask that question. But eventually they ask that question. And the idea is to create an ease of transition. And often what they want to do is they want to share stories about their life. And we found that is a significant social bonding exercise. And this is something we're losing because we're no longer having multi-generation families living together, gathering at least once a week, and going through that routine of telling stories about the family that connects us. It sounds silly, it sounds ridiculous. Just simple stories, gossiping about neighbors that from 60 years ago. That's part of what creates the social connectivity between generations, and we no longer have that. So one of our students, that's her PhD research, is looking at how can we support this in this digital world. And what we found out is we do a lot of research that's very ethnographic. So she spent time with seniors, visiting their homes, found out what they're struggling with. The moment they have a guest, they like to take the guest sometimes through the walls. We found those typical picture walls. And they touch on pictures and they start telling stories randomly. Or they gather at the dining table and they take out the shoebox and start spreading the pictures and kind of telling stories. So we want to mimic that with technology. So what she designed is this tablet application where you can put all your pictures and it shuffles them around. And it has what we call an infinity scroll, so it's completely unstructured. And no matter how many pictures you have, it always kind of cycles back in 3D. So you move, you grab the pictures and you move them around. And you can tell a story. And the moment you touch on a picture, it records what you're saying and it synchronizes with the picture. It's very strange because when people see a digital photo storage, they immediately assume these are albums, they're organized by date. What we found out is if you give people everything organized, what they do, they engage in a labeling exercise. This is my cousin John. This is my grandniece Sally's wedding. So they put labels and that's it. There's no story. We found that with this, they actually engage in much, much longer stories and they start telling stories. They find it strange that it's completely messy, but they actually end up telling stories. And some of these stories are, well, we almost call them sometimes ramblings. They're not ramblings, they're unstructured. It just goes from one to another, another story prompts, another picture prompts another story. They're very engaging with this. So this is research that's ongoing, and now we're looking at ways to share this across families. We're looking at ways to ask questions from seniors. We found that seniors often don't have any motivation to start a story. So we're asking young family members, what would you like your seniors to tell you about? There's always that stereotypes of seniors tell stories about the war and that's about that. So we got some very interesting questions. We had one young participant said, I would like to know what shoes they wore when they went dancing. This is very interesting. You can find a little bit of information about that historically online, but it's different when it comes from family members. And it doesn't have much of a value than just creating that connection. It doesn't have a historical or an archival value. It's creating that connection and facilitating it with easy-to-use technology. And again, going back, sometimes you have to connect with family members, but sometimes you need the family members to help you access information. What we found out is some of those social gatherings and family dinners that offer about sort of debugging health conditions. So we found out that all the seniors are struggling to navigate the health information that's available online. So we're developing a platform that builds on our previous work that allows seniors to read things online and ask family members for help. What we found out through, again, very ethnographic research, we found that seniors are very frustrated going to the doctors because they read about things and doctors dismiss those things. We're very upset. We had seniors that had subscription to the British Medical Journal. They were reading, highlighting, not understanding a thing. They would come to us, we could not explain because we're in computer science. They would go to their family doctor and the family doctor says, where did you read this? And say like, on the internet, it's like, don't trust what you find on the internet. And they're afraid to ask their family members for help because the problem is that when they ask for help, family members get worried. And we found out the seniors do this, not I would say for fun, but they have someone, a friend that has cancer or something like that. They start reading about that. And they don't understand, but they want to know more about it. They're afraid to ask family members or share what they found because they want the family members to be worried about their own conditions. So we're developing a very private social mechanism where you have a grandniece that's maybe in medical school. Can you just discreetly ask the question? So we're highlighting, you can highlight things that you find online in any document, and you can point someone to that part you highlighted and say, can you explain this to me? So trying to have a very, very discreet method of getting more information about things. And this is a problem we're finding often. It's the technology gets developed for seniors and then excludes other generations from participating. Or the other way around, it's lots of efforts to get seniors into the digital media spaces for younger generations. And that creates a big gap because the younger generations do not adopt those technologies. One thing that we try as a way to address this is getting seniors to participate in the social media activities of younger generations. So we create, yes?
What age group are you classifying as seniors?
So depends on what we're looking for. Typically 60 and above, but depends on what we're looking for. So for things that, for example, are more financial in nature, we have a big project now that's underway on budgeting practices. So then we say 60. This one we look usually around 80 or 70. In some cases we say oldest old, like 85 plus. In most cases we try to stick with a sort of government definition of 65. So it depends on the case.
As digitally marginalized older adults, I would think I've got to be over 80.
It varies. So that's
Under 80, we're fine. Most of us are fine.
It varies. It varies a lot. And we actually have people who are even younger than 60. We're not calling them older adults, who are digital marginalized for other things as they prepare for retirement. For example, the program I mentioned with budgeting. They don't use any technology to help them properly budget for retirement. So they are actually quite serious, like in serious danger.
So it's the literacy, digital literacy part.
It's the digital literacy combined with everything else. It's such a complex situation that we don't want to strictly define it as age. And also we found things, so for example in this project we had the seniors, some of them were in their early 70s. And because of our recruitment, some of them were very limited with our recruitment. Most of them were university educated. Engineers, accountants, retired accountants, and they were digitally almost illiterate. Depends on many things. We had engineers that were immigrants, so they moved here through family reunification, but they were engineers, but they never used technology where they came from. So very well educated, but not digitally knowledgeable. The other interesting thing is there's also a very dynamic digital. What is digitally literate can be many things depending also what you're looking at. Someone asked me, just this week we had a meeting with a company looking at healthcare technologies, and they said like, well, everyone eventually is going to be fully digital literate because the current generations are very literate digitally. And it's like not true because the moment they retire, the technology use drops a lot and you're not keeping up. And I challenged the person to tell me what social media they use. They weren't using Snapchat, which everyone in their 20s is using. And I got that question from students and said, well, but we're going to use Snapchat. Do you think Snapchat is going to be around 30 years from now? And how about Kik? Everyone that's under 16 is using. So everything changes all the time and it's hard to keep up as we age. So that's why digital marginalization. We had participants in our national project. So we had participants that we were surprised in their late 80s that had no problem understanding the difference between internet that comes over the Wi-Fi and internet that comes over your SIM card that you put in the tablet. They had iPads with SIM cards in it. The moment they show up in the lab, they said like, what's your Wi-Fi password? I don't want to use my data. We were shocked to see an 85-year-old ask us that question. We had two of them did that. But they had trouble understanding why do you need a separate Skype account, a separate iTunes account, and a separate Gmail account on your tablet. They just couldn't tell them apart. It was absolutely confusing, and the interface doesn't help. So the digital literacy becomes narrow and vertical. So in this project, this is what we looked at as leveraging what they know how to use. And in this case, we use a laptop, and it was an automatically ready PowerPoint slides of pictures that the family member posted during that week, and they get it as a digest. So they participate in their family member activities without having to adopt a new platform. As a side note around this, we're looking at, this was a very small side project we had with design student, looking at moving that to another form of interaction. So we built this tree where people were checking in on Instagram and other feeds, and we had things light up in the tree based on those activities. So you would have it on your wall, and every branch would be another family member. So little Jimmy goes swimming, then goes having music lessons and so on. So again, looking at that way of kind of having a more passive consumption of digital content as a way to create it easing into. And that's what we found out, is finding this path of least resistance to increasing digital access. So a bit of a contrast here. One of the projects we're looking at right now is gaming, but we're not trying to reinvent gaming for seniors, which has been done. We're trying to see what can we do to get seniors to participate in the current gaming activities of the younger generations. And how we can create a rating system for commercially available games, so you know that this game is suitable for not just age. You see all the video games have a kind of sort of label on them that says rated. So we want to have this same thing but for seniors. So this is rated good for seniors and 12-year-olds to play together. And we're doing an ethnography to look at how we can play that. And I mentioned the thing with the so the Wi-Fi thing. That's the context of the project is looking at an interface to help seniors to manage things like an iPad application. We found that they were struggling a lot with setting up menus and things like that. They know one or two things, but had a hard time with everything else. So for those of you who grew up with other versions of Windows, remember the F1 button. So we're building a physical F1 button. It's a squishy Bluetooth connection. When you press that, it tells you where you are, what can you do, and help you get back to where you were. As a sort of, again, training wheel, and of course. Starting with the Alexa, and sort of slowly wrap up, getting there. All these things that are coming up in our homes that can be very intrusive. We do not have digital design guidelines for that. We don't know how to design this. Talking to a white or black cylinder that sits on your table does not always seem the most intuitive one, especially for seniors. So we're looking at seeing how we can design these conversational interfaces to match the mental models of seniors about how to interact with these technologies and establish design guidelines for these things. Slowly kind of wrapping it up, one of the problems we found in general with digital technology, and this is for those of you who studied this, is things such as the technology acceptance model and things like that, around the notion of having some value in this. So, but often what we found is also a reluctance to use these things out of fear of the consequences of it. And one of the problems we found in general is online technologies. There's a safety fear that a lot of the seniors have in using them. Initially, our project started with a notion of maybe seniors are more affected by scams. We actually found that it's not necessarily true. It's about the same as everyone else. It's misreported, but it is about statistically, it's about the same. But what that leads to is increasing the fears of doing things online. Things that could help, the things that everyone could benefit from. We found that they don't do much shopping online because they're afraid that their credit card is going to get scammed, including from established retailers like Amazon. They don't do banking online because they are afraid that something's going to happen to their money. They're not going to have anyone to talk to them. We did a test around scams by email, and we found that actually seniors were very good. If anything, they were erring on the side of caution. They flagged emails as suspicious. They were coming from good charities. Because they were worried that this may kind of lead to them getting into some sort of a trouble. And with that kind of whole notion of too good to be true, they were very good at it. None of them would fall for it. Occasionally you see people falling for scams, and sometimes it leads to a lot of significant financial loss, but it's not as common as we think it is. But what that does, it creates this climate of fears, and because of the social isolation, they don't have anyone to ask for help and for support, and sometimes they're embarrassed to ask for help, and that leads them from not doing anything online. We even built a convincing scam website for a bank, and they were not trusting it much. They didn't get to put, we tested to see if they would put personal information in it, and they didn't. They didn't trust it. They never heard of this messaging design. But it's the issue of trust. and the lack of social support. We had one of our participants used to get her very old big laptop. She doesn't have a car, she lives downtown Toronto, and she would take it across 2 bus lines to a small shop, the edges of town, where there was one guy that sold her the first laptop 10 years ago, to have it a clean checkup on security, just kind of a security scan. And she was worried that anyone else would see her laptop. Didn't trust anyone else. It's an issue of trust. So these barriers can push people even further away from using this technology that would help them. Home delivery, banking, government issues, taxes, all that stuff that's moving online. And if we're not looking at the barriers that seniors have in adopting that, then they will not benefit. And just to wrap it up, back to futuristic technologies. Yes?
I was just going to say, it could be that the seniors, and I guess I'm one, but it could be that the seniors have it right.
Yes, no,
The reluctance to do all these things online is protecting their identity, their income, and that the rest of us are going to go down because we've been using these convenient services.
And I think I'm mostly agreeing with you. Sometimes we're very reckless with these things. The issue is, how do we find that sweet spot with like doing it securely while not sort of missing out on the things like home delivery and things like that everyone could benefit. And it's issue of trust and how we establish that and things like we found actually. Seniors were afraid of using credit cards online with things like Amazon, but we asked them and they trusted using the Interact, like debit card, in a mom-and-pop shop, which for those who study security know that those are the weakest, the easiest to hack and constantly hacked. And it's much harder to recuperate money from a debit account than from a credit card account that got hacked. And the retailers like Amazon are so good at security that the chance of that happening is also very small. But it's a perception. So how do we overcome that so we actually do it properly? So it's, yes, but you're right. And you read about this across generations and it's sometimes scary when teenagers are getting into it. So yes, I think we're sort of, we can learn a bit from their cautiousness. Well, on that note, going back to the futuristic technologies, a small side project one of my master's students working on, going back full circle to futuristic technologies, helping older adults meditate and stay mentally sane as they age using brain-computer interfaces and trying to design these things that you put in your head that have a million electrodes in that would help you attach to maybe a virtual reality or something like that. That helps you. Mindful meditation. I just want to bring this up there. I started with a futuristic technology and how we're not designing that properly. We're doing a participatory design, getting seniors to tell us how to design this for them if they want to learn meditation. And on that note, I'd like to thank you and thank Adriel for supporting all this research. And more questions, happy to chat about it.
Thank you very much.